As wrestling fans, we're often presented with gimmicks that are lame to watch, but spare a thought for the wrestlers who have to portray them. In this video, we're taking a look at a bunch of superstars who were lumbered with terrible characters, and they damn well knew it. Steve Austin's journey to becoming Stone Cold was not an easy one. When he joined the WWF, Vince McMahon gave him the character of the Ringmaster. Before joining the Federation, Austin had already felt the frustration of working in WCW. There he was stunning Steve Austin and he made the most of things, but he didn't get to do what he wanted to do. But then he moved to ECW, where he found a place that he could finally develop his own character. Paul Heyman let him go out there and cut intense promos that showcased his real potential, and Austin had hoped to continue this creativity in the WWF on a bigger scale. However, Vince McMahon had other ideas. He pitched the Ringmaster gimmick to Austin and he instantly hated it. What the fuck is the Master of the Ring? The Ringmaster? It sounded like shit. But I got bills to pay, so I was like, sounds like a good idea. What time do you want me to start? Austin just hated the gimmick from the very start. He felt that he had no personality and it was so bland. It was weak, and it didn't allow him to connect with the fans. And despite him having already proved that he was a great promo guy, they kept him silent and let his manager, Ted DiBiase, do all of the talking. In the end, Austin used his gift of the gab to talk McMahon around, and thankfully, Stone Cold was born just a little while later. Cody Rhodes was already well established in WWE before he was repackaged as Stardust in 2014. They transformed him so he could perform in a tag team alongside his brother Dustin, aka Goldust. And initially, Cody embraced the Stardust character. He saw it as a new challenge and an opportunity to showcase his versatility. But as time went on, his enthusiasm started to wear thin and he started to feel trapped by the character. And let's be fair, he was never going to become the undisputed WWE champion in that outfit. Cody repeatedly asked management to let him drop the Stardust persona, but they insisted on keeping him as Stardust for as long as possible. It was a total creative dead end for Cody, so it's no wonder that he quit the company in 2016. I don't think Stardust should be in the main event on any show ever, anywhere on this planet, so I needed to find out what I can do to get better. If you're the same as you were, that's not a good thing. You're not growing, and for me, I was just getting worse and finally made the call to go and get better. Terry Taylor is another great example of a talented wrestler being saddled with a dead-end character. There were high hopes for young Terry when he first arrived in the WWF. He'd already had a respectable career in the NWA during the mid-80s. He was a good wrestler with a decent amount of charisma, but nobody could have guessed that he would go on to become the human embodiment of a rooster, a red rooster. According to JBL, the red rooster was a punishment by WWF management. It was a deliberate attempt to embarrass him because he had a reputation amongst the other wrestlers for being a corporate stooge, or in other words, a kiss-ass. Taylor didn't stick around in the WWF for very long, that he didn't sign a contract extension. In fact, he never really managed to escape the shadow of the Red Rooster for the rest of his career. When Mike Shaw first joined the WWF in 1993, he was given the gimmick of a drunken monk named Friar Ferguson. It was a pretty lame gimmick for sure, but the character was dropped after only 2 appearances due to pressure from religious groups, and so they had to have a rethink on the character for sure, which is when Vince McMahon noticed how fat he was getting. Shaw had always been overweight, but he was always fast and agile for his size, which kind of made up for it. However, by the time he joined the WWF, he'd put on a lot of weight, and so, as a punishment for eating too many cheeseburgers, he got renamed Bastion Booger. This new character was that of a fat, sloppy, lazy wrestler. He was dressed in a torn singlet that barely covered his body, and he was depicted as being unhygienic, constantly picking his nose and eating large quantities of food. Naturally, Shaw hated this degrading gimmick from the very start. Luckily for him, he was only on a 1-year contract, and as soon as that expired, he was straight out the door. Fans will mostly remember Shane Douglas for his incredible work as the franchise in ECW, but in 1995 he went to the WWF, where he was rebranded as Dean Douglas thanks to his real-life academic background. The Gimmick saw him cast as an arrogant schoolteacher, critiquing wrestlers and their performances on his chalkboard. The character was designed to be a heel, but it came off as forced and it didn't suit him at all. And Douglas faced backstage politics. The Clique allegedly didn't want him in the WWF, and they aimed to get him fired as quickly as possible. Jim Cornette mentioned on his podcast that Scott Hall would deliberately throw the pace off during their matches just to make Douglas look bad. Douglas picked up a serious back injury, but Vince McMahon still wanted him to wrestle. According to Douglas, the doctors told him that he could end up paralysed if he wrestled before his back was fully healed, which led to a complete breakdown in the relationship between Douglas and McMahon, and he left the WWF in January 1996. He later called his time as Dean Douglas the worst 6 months of his entire career. Before Glenn Jacobs found success as Kane, he had to endure some truly awful gimmicks, and one of the worst was Isaac Yankem, DDS. When Jacobs joined the WWF in 1995, he was given the character of an evil dentist. Isaac Yankem was Jerry Lawler's personal, terrifying dentist brought in to feud with Bret Hart. It was after a Kiss My Foot match where Hart shoved his tootsies into Lawler's mouth, and he apparently required dental work. Luckily, his orthodontist was also a fully trained wrestler. The feud saw Isaac Yankem facing off against Bret Hart in several matches, including one at SummerSlam in 1995. That wasn't a character that I could invest in, and I didn't. It was my fault. My teeth were painted, it tasted terrible. Vince McMahon thought it was ironic that a dentist had bad teeth. My entrance music was a dental drill. Mr. Jacobs must have breathed a sigh of relief in 1997 when they finally came up with Kane. The Black Scorpion gimmick is one of the most ridiculous and poorly conceived storylines in wrestling history. It was 1990 in WCW, and the Black Scorpion was meant to be a mysterious figure from Sting's past. We couldn't tell who he was because he used a voice changer when he spoke, and he wore a mask. Sting was the World Heavyweight Champion at the time, and he'd been feuding with Ric Flair for months. They needed to come up with someone new for him to face. But this being WCW, they hadn't lined up anyone fresh for him to feud with in the interim. Originally, it was supposed to be Al Perez under the mask, but due to a contract dispute, he ended up leaving the company. And so, WCW strung this thing out over months, with various different wrestlers having to play the role while they tried to think of a suitable conclusion.
Sting.
What in the world? Wait a second.
Sting.
Apparently the voice.
The people have waited for you, but I know you have been waiting for me. In just a short while, I'll give you and everyone a chance to see my great powers of black magic. In just a little while, Sting. Bye for now, Sting.
They had the Black Scorpion come out and perform the lamest magic tricks that you've ever seen in your life and try to pass it off as black magic. And just to really convince the fans that the Black Scorpion was one dangerous motherfucker, he arrived for his match against Sting in a UFO. And what really became evident as he walked to the ring was that it was Ric Flair under the mask this time around. The whole point of the gimmick was to give Sting a heel opponent who wasn't Flair, and they ended up putting him under the mask anyway. It was Flair that volunteered to go out there as the Black Scorpion just to get them out of a mess, but he was seriously unhappy about it. The whole thing just symbolised the state of WCW at the time, and Flair knew it was a creative disaster that he just shouldn't have been a part of. At the end of the match with Sting, off came the mask, and nobody mentioned the Black Scorpion ever again.